Welcome, Charlotte Kemp. Today we are going to explore the latest trends, ideas, and innovations shaping our world regarding education. I'm your host. My name is Andra Satika, and today we will have a very special guest joining us to discuss the future of education. As the future alchemist, Charlotte Kemp works with corporations to design desired futures as a futurist keynote speaker. She was formerly president of the Professional Speakers Association of Southern Africa and currently serves as the president of the Global Speakers Federation for 2023 to 2024. She serves as the Chief Relationship Officer for Voices into Africa and is a member of the Association of Professional Futurists. Future Alchemist, the book she wrote, describes her map, compass, and guide system for navigating futures. Charlotte, welcome to the show.
Abdullah, thank you so much. I really enjoy speaking to people around the world about how the future affects them. So being able to address students looking at the future of education, the future of their careers, is really wonderful. I appreciate the invitation. Thank you.
I'm glad to know. It's an absolute pleasure to have you here. To start, could you give our listeners a brief overview of your work as a futurist and how you came up with the name The Future Alchemist? It's a very interesting name.
Thank you so much. So a futurist is someone who uses various tools and models and data that we have in order to prepare ourselves for the future, whether it's ourselves as individuals or organizations, even countries. All the futures tools that we use, that we refer to, are really robust. They are real tools. They're not just kind of make-believe, somebody imagining a theory. So they're real tools. They've been used by the largest governments in the world, international organizations, the largest militaries in the world. For myself, I feel it's very important that if there's a really good resource, like a tool, that we should be able to bring it into the hands of people, individuals who can use them, rather than just kind of gatekeeping it for the bigger organizations. So a lot of my work is helping to demonstrate how those tools and thoughts can be used by everyday people. In fact, my position is that everyone is a futurist. Everyone on this call, listening to this anytime in the future, you are all futurists. I'm a professional futurist. You're a natural futurist because you're preparing for your future in terms of your education. So we all need to think that way. The Futures Alchemist part is a little bit of a branding approach, but a lot of fun. Alchemy is the ancient concept, the proto-science of trying to take one element and turn it into something else. So we all know the ancient alchemists were apparently trying to turn lead into gold. So there's something of a lower order into a higher order. When we look at the future, when we look at education, we're taking everyday stuff that we're doing and we're transmuting it into something more in the future, something of a higher order. So that's what I do.
That's interesting. How resources, if it's simply given and known to the average person, they can do so much with it. I think that's a great concept that affects everyone, from me, you, everyone in here, everyone watching, and parents and policymakers.
Yeah. So it really does. I think very often when we look at any futures concept that is out there, they all seem to be very broad. The research, the academic stuff is very broad, and it feels like it's not something that we can actually have an impact on. I know that we're having elections around the world at the moment, but when an individual stands in a queue for a very long time to cast their vote, they're demonstrating that they believe the action and choice they make has an impact on the country. And we need to think about the impact on our future as well, not about the elections, but in how our everyday work actually affects the future. If we have got a policy system that we're operating under that doesn't serve us, we need to challenge it. And futures thinking helps us to kind of assess the work that we're doing, the education that we're receiving, the politics and policies we're living under in a way that helps us to actually create and evolve something better for the future. So that's how impactful it is in everything we do.
I see. That seems like a big concept. Though with the idea of elections and all that, you're personally voting and affecting the world in a small way that way. Now, speaking of the person itself and what the person does, personalized education is a huge talking point nowadays. How do you envision personalized education evolving in the future?
It is essential. One of the biggest problems we have in any kind of topic like this is that concept of scale. So Abdullah, if you and I were just talking and I was helping you to frame what you're going to do for your education, for your future, that would be a fascinating, interesting conversation where you can take action. But when we look at big policy, when we look at governments having to educate so many children, such a big portion of their population, then it becomes more challenging to individualize anything on a mass scale. So that's what the challenge is. And we're aware of that challenge. But when we have the opportunity to do something more personal, then we really need to dig into it, which is why a school system like yours, even this conversation we're having right now, is so important, because it gives you all the privilege and the opportunity of focusing in on the things that you need to learn so that your education actually serves you in the future. Personalized learning, it can be done. There are tools, I'm sure we'll get to some of them and discuss them, but there are ways to make this more personal and nuanced. And I think that very often it's not just the scale, it's kind of like the embeddedness of a system. It's so hard to change a system that has worked for 2 decades. Why should we change it? That's what we have to push back on and say that it's not just for this child, for this family, for this school. We need to actually address education more and more to evolve, to keep up with things. Otherwise, the education you receive is not relevant for your future. And that's what we have to do, is we have to prepare, students for the future.
Well, that's great. I do hope we get into some of the personalized learning examples. And yeah, I agree. Even simple conversations can be really productive, even to listen to.
Yeah.
Now, when it comes to the person, there are tools that everyone uses. And one of the big tools that's, lately a big trend with generative AI, or in general AI, what role do you think artificial intelligence and machine learning can play in shaping individualized learning experiences, personalized learning?
It's fascinating. It can be entertaining. It can deliver some interesting results. People can play with it like like another app. Or we can realize that what artificial intelligence is allowing us and going to be allowing us to do in the future, it is as significant as when the printing press was invented. Before the printing press, people hand wrote books. So if you wanted a school textbook, you would have to be incredibly wealthy, in the elite, for somebody to have, spent 9 to 12 months hand writing a copy of a book that already existed just for you. Printing press comes along, everybody can have books, education, resources in their own hands. And then we got obviously the computer and the internet, all that stuff is available. But artificial intelligence is just turning everything on its head and creating more opportunities. And we have not yet grasped the impact of what that is going to be on our society. So in terms of education, the first thing is every person needs to become familiar with AI. We do not have to get a degree in artificial intelligence. We do not need to study it, but we cannot have it as this novelty that is on the side of our lives, or something that 1 or 2 people in the family play with. We all need to become familiar with the various tools, with how they work, with what we can do with them. Because once we do that, we'll start to grasp the impact of what it could mean on our careers, on our future. I've used artificial intelligence in the last few months to to do things I was not able to do 2 years ago. So now I can take an outline of a learning program that I have designed, and I can have artificial intelligence tell me where the gaps are. But where are the things that are missing that I did not even think to add into that? I can get AI to compare my learning program to another learning program and to create a blended program that is deeper and more valuable to whoever is the delegate or the student. So it means that the work that we produce can be way more impactful and valuable, almost denser with content instead of just like a frivolous, entertaining piece of learning. So it helps us to learn. It helps us to teach. It helps us to share ideas, to explore things. And whenever I'm trying to learn something new, I have 2 AI apps open at the same time as I'm doing this. And I'm just interrogating my thoughts and what I'm learning with those apps. I'm not saying that the apps necessarily have the right answer, but they're bringing insights to me that I did not have before. So it is huge. How schools bring that into the curriculum. I know a lot of schools around the world, their first reaction to artificial intelligence is the student is going to use it to produce an essay that they didn't write. And yes, they're right. Yeah, students will do that. Okay. But if we teach students how to use AI to come up with deeper answers or unique answers or insights that we didn't have before, it's not so much about producing a 200-word essay. It's about getting an insight, learning something. And AI should be open on everybody's desks all the time so that they can be learning that. I'm sorry to the teachers who are listening who might not agree with me.
Let's hope that apology goes through. So a lot of these things are, as I said, AI is a major tool. It is a relatively new tool, or at least for the average person.
Yeah.
And, with these tools in mind, I reckon there are other tools, especially, the tool of knowledge, a skill, even.
Yeah.
And every few years, the skills you need to have the best job coming up, the best career, changes a lot. So, like, with the current trends, for the students currently here, what are the skills they need for the soon future? See from what you know.
Very good. I have produced a small infographic which I've sent through, and I'm sure will be shared with everyone shortly. And what I've done is I go to the World Economic Forum. They put out a report every few years about the top few skills. So I've looked at that, kind of like the last couple of reports that they've done. What are those skills? They kind of shift around a little bit. And then I've looked, elsewhere, what are the things we need to learn? And it's come down to like essentially 5 categories of tools. Now, first of all, it's important for me as an educator, as someone who wants to bring content and ideas to people, to not put a burden on anybody to feel like, alongside your school education and everything else that you're doing, you now have to go and learn all these things. That can be quite a burden, but I'd like you to think of it in terms of categories, and as places that you want to be curious, you want to explore, you want to understand more. And later on, I'll tell you what my homework assignment is for you. But once you got an awareness of that, you can start picking up the skills, and a lot of them will just come from development. So at the start of your career going forward, if you're looking to what you want to achieve, you can start to fill in and intentionally go and get the experiences you need to fill in any gaps you have. But so broadly, let me just give you the 5 areas of broad skills. The one is, thinking skills. It's how we think. We don't often think about how we think. We just do things. And then we get, an exam mark back and we go, well, I didn't think about that properly, but we don't know what it is we're thinking. And there's different styles of thinking. So there can be critical, analytical thinking where you're trying to narrow down to an answer. There can be divergent possibility, creative thinking, where you're trying to explore all different kinds of ideas, but you're not coming down to a single answer. Okay. So it's kind of like, think about maths versus art. Those are 2 different kinds of thinking skills, and we need to play around with them and explore them more. There's also systems thinking, which I think is really important. A systems thinking approach says any system that exists exists to do something. So if we if you think about the system that runs a car, or the system that runs a computer, or the system of a school, all those systems are there and they're moving parts, and it's a very kind of complex arrangement. When we see things we don't like that seem to be broken, that are broken and don't get repaired, like if you think about, just ideas from what I'm watching on TV, like a gangland area, there's a gang in place. People say, why can't we get rid of the gang? Or there's a person who eats really badly and drinks too much and they're unhealthy. And we say, well, why can't you just get better and be healthy and stop doing bad things? Both of those are systems. And even though the systems to our sight, they look bad, they're there for a reason. There's something that system serves. So you actually have to find what is at the heart of that. If there's a gangland situation, somebody's getting money, somebody's on the top of that gang, and they don't want the gang to go away, they don't want the drugs to go away, they don't want the neighborhood to be cleaned up because it serves them. So when we start thinking like that, we start to see things very differently in the world. We don't just go and try and fix what's on top. We try and look at the whole system so that we can address the real problems. And that's the real value of when we start thinking about the future. So that's just one skill set, thinking. I won't go into detail for all of them. The other one is people skills. We've got computers, they do great things, but people still need to interact and engage with each other. So everything like collaboration, emotional intelligence, understanding diversity of all kinds, including all the neurodiversity, service orientation, those are all people skills. We need technology skills. We need to know how to use computers and devices and things. There are opportunities to learn more so we can become more literate about digital literacy, media literacy, futures literacy. But we also need to recognize that there are systems, technologies that are not necessarily like digital. There are other systems like agriculture or communities. Those are technologies as well, because things are kind of connecting with each other, and we can learn more about that. Personal development, everything that helps us to grow and develop, and then organizational skills. So how do we work within an organization or a community? Again, customer service, strategic foresight, project management. And none of these are necessarily on your curriculum, but everything that you're learning will fit into one of those. But if you got the categories in your mind, like I'm thinking about how I think, or I'm learning a new thinking style, or that interaction with that teacher, or that interaction with my classmate didn't go well, what went wrong? Okay, the more we interrogate ourselves and understand ourselves, the more we develop, the more prepared we are for the future.
Okay. Very integral skills. They're also very relevant to the lives of most people. I mean, technology, people thinking, in fact, systematic thinking, where you look at like the causes of and the relations to one another. I think that's something that not a lot of people look at, and I think that's a wonderful thinking to have. But within and systems that actually works great to weave into another question, and that is with a lot of times when it comes to like the overall system of education. Sometimes people say something like, the system is flawed. And that gets me to then asking you this important question that I'm sure is on a lot of people's minds. These points about AI and the thinking skills and how, all this can be integrated. What changes would you suggest for educational policies to better align with all these talking points and for the future needs, of course?
Good. Again, a lot of this is about scale. So I know that what I'm going to suggest happens in different places. But to the extent that it happens, to the extent that we understand that it's happening, we talk about it, that's kind of missing. I said at the beginning that I think we're all futurists. So all of us on this call, we're thinking about the future. We're thinking about our education or our careers. So we aren't natural futurists. Any system or set of policies or organization, government departments that set up curricula, they're also they're peopled by people who are futurists. And those people, I have to believe that they intend to do a good job. Nobody rises to the top of an organization to make the life difficult for everybody in it. They have an intention of doing the right thing. I think the problem, though, is that the people sometimes in decision-making positions are not making decisions based on futures thinking, on strategic foresight. So let me just explain strategic foresight. We learn a lot about strategic planning, and strategic planning is, here are our objectives, and these are the things we have to do, and these are all the stakeholders and the resources and the timeline and the value line and things like that. And we want to be strategic about that and make a really good, solid plan that, will deal with a couple of things going wrong. Strategic foresight intentionally looks at that plan, but also a plan where everything goes wrong, and also a plan where everything goes brilliantly well. And in between those scenarios, we now have a broader perspective of what is possible and what is coming. So strategic foresight is really important. And people at the top of organizations sometimes don't embrace strategic foresight. They don't embrace the future because their personal values and their experiences tell a different story. So I'll tell you a story from my childhood. Second last year of high school, it's a Sunday lunchtime, and my family is together with my grandparents and aunts and uncles. And because I'm about to go into my last year of school, the adults are all talking about me and suggesting what it is I should be doing. They weren't asking me. They were having a conversation about what I should be doing in my career. And my father came up with this little recipe. He said, I need to go to university and get a BCom degree with law. And then I need to go to a financial company and get a job there. And I need to start paying into my retirement annuity on my very first paycheck. So commerce, law, an insurance company, and paying into my retirement annuity. If I did that, my dad believed I would be set and happy and everything would be great. I was a rebellious child. So I know some people are applauding that, but I didn't do a BCom. I did a BA, a Bachelor of Arts. My majors were education and psychology. And then I did a whole bunch of things. And there's a photo, I don't have it here right now, but there's a photo I have that I sometimes use in my work. And I'm standing on a stage in front of a group of people who are association executives. So they run professional bodies like the Association of Surgeons or the Association of Professional Speakers or the Association of Futurists, that kind of thing. So they run associations, they're in the room, I'm speaking to them from a stage, I'm doing a presentation. The presentation is about the future of how their organizations will evolve into the future, what they need to pay attention to. But that particular slide was about a digital footprint. In other words, how we appear online, on social media, etc. And that photo represents 4 careers that I have. Being a social media manager, social media educator, being a keynote speaker, being a futurist, and being an association executive myself, so running various associations. Mm-hmm. All 4 of those are the most meaningful work that I've ever done. Not one of them could I have studied at university. There was nothing in school, there was nothing in university when I was there that would have addressed any of those things. And yet that is how I make my living. So when we look at educational policies, when people are trying to put things in place to prepare students for the future, it has to be for their future, for the real future that they have. My father was trying to prepare me for the future he had hoped that he might have had when he was a student. He never went to university. I was the first person in my family to go to university. So had he had the opportunity, he would have gone to university and done this degree. Had he stayed in the insurance company and paid into his retirement, then he knew that he would retire with enough money, but he'd had an up and down career, so that didn't work. And he wanted to protect me and take care of me because he loved me. But his advice was for his generation, not for my generation. And I have another photo that I sometimes share with us all at the airport. During COVID, we're wearing masks, but we're allowed to be together to say goodbye to my daughter who left home to go and study a creative business degree in the Netherlands.
Nice.
really, really interesting work. She's learning things she would never have experienced before. And I've given her that space to explore what is relevant for her future, not what I wish I could have done or wish I had done or done differently. It has to be what is relevant for her future. So coming back to, what are those policies? I know we get frustrated, but it's really, leadership is a really tough role. Somebody who's in that position, there's a lot that they have to take care of. And sitting down and philosophically reflecting on what, a young 10-year-old person really just about to approach high school, what will they need to know so that they're relevant in 2045? That leader does not have the capacity to think like that. There's too much on their agenda. So we have to find ways to keep communicating, to keep addressing it. As students, as parents, as teachers and educators, we have to keep evolving that thinking. But, and this is on the infographic that I'm going to send to you.
Nice.
Each one of you individually, your education really is in your hands. You have the agency. Your family, your teachers, this school is doing as much as they can for you. But there's going to be a certain point where what you know or don't know is going to depend on what you have gone to find out. So it's going to come back into your hands. You have to fill in any gaps that you don't have. You have to go and follow the dopamine, follow the this is interesting. I wonder if. There are some people with absolutely bizarre careers that never existed before because people have created them because of their own unique insight into the world and the things that they want to do. So I'm not saying go off and do crazy things and hope that money will come, but be open to new opportunities that are coming because of evolution in technology and society and things like that. So there you go, like a multifaceted answer to that question.
Well, it has to be multifaceted. It's like the one question where if someone says only one facet, something feels missing. Huge question.
Very good. Very good.
I do like how you bring up how a lot of the times people in these top positions, they do not mean any harm. They didn't just fall there, right?
Yeah.
That's great to wonder about. I think another interesting thing to also ponder about this is how when the children of today gain this sort of education, perhaps some of them would become these policymakers later on, and then the cycle would repeat. And then the next generation would have even better and better and better. And it allows society to get better over time, which I think is why your answer, while multifaceted, is great.
Good. Thank you.
Yeah. Now, we were talking about how the perspectives of these policymakers, perspective of your father, for example, was different. Everyone has a bit of a different perspective, but when we expand that a little bit more than just the individual perspective or the perspective of just one government or organization, there's a whole world. There's students all around the world. They're all doing their things, and many schools around the world as well. When we look at this scale in different parts of the world, how, what regions do you think are charging this path that we are discussing?
Yeah. Oh, that's very good. When I coach people to help them to get their career to evolve in a more satisfying way, the very first thing that I look at is perspective. And there's two perspectives. One is a futures perspective. So if you're just trying to satisfy the next quarter or the next year, you're really selling yourself short. So you have to have a longer term view. The second one is a global perspective, because we think, if my experience are just the people in my town and there are things going on, and I don't have a perspective about the rest of the world, so then I think, well, everything is like this. It's all bad, or it's all friendly, or it's all dangerous, whatever it is. So we need that global perspective so that we open our minds to everything that is possible. So my advice, first of all, besides the question, is look far and wide. Again, you do not need to study something. You do not have to immerse yourself in a culture or another language or something unless you want to. But go online, go and follow some people from different parts of the world, read books from different parts of the world. Don't just get stuck into one system, because that will narrow your thinking and leave you a little bit vulnerable to other ideas. So when we look at education around the world, again, lots of different things that are happening. based, I think, quite a bit on the culture and nature of the country. So again, there will be, in any country, there will be individual schools doing different things, or school systems doing different things. Yeah, broadly speaking, when we look at some of the Scandinavian countries and Finland in particular, Finland's got a really interesting education system. It's very much kind of based on the student, very much personalized, to the point that there's even some conversation in Finland about not gendering a child. So not forcing a
Repeat that word.
girl to
What to a child?
gendering. So applying a gender to.
Oh, yeah. Okay, go on.
Okay. So the children's names are sometimes gender neutral, so that they're not saying girls have to do this and boys have to do that, and girls play this way and boys play that way. When we're just more open to looking at the child without applying a label like a gender, then that education is individualized. Then they're making space for children who are neurodivergent, who think differently, who learn differently. Some children, need to experience things. Others can be more reflective. Some are more physically active and need to move around, and others can sit still and quietly. And just to say that that's girl behavior, boy behavior, means that you miss out certain things. There are so many girls and women in the world being diagnosed with ADHD at a much later stage in their lives than boys, because all the research about ADHD thought they'd applied to boys. So girls have been left at an additional disadvantage because they weren't even recognize what was going on. They were just labeled, dreamy or uncooperative or difficult, instead of ADHD. Let's teach this person in a certain way. So when you take away certain roles and you focus on the individual, then you can actually achieve more. So, and Finland does that very well. I know Singapore's got really great artificial intelligence and kind of embedded in the school. I was in a school in Malaysia to visit, and they were explaining that this school was set up to teach entrepreneurial skills in a country where the rest of the education was set up to prepare children for working in offices or in corporates. But this one school was like focused on entrepreneurship, and not just, I know many schools have like an entrepreneur day or an entrepreneur project. This school was designed to teach young children, even young children in primary school, how to prepare themselves for the future as an entrepreneur. So they learned about budgeting and accounting and marketing and business plans and how to sell. And there were 2 children in that school that those children were paying their own school fees from the sale of the products that they had developed, because they had learned so well. And that's an A+ for those kids. So there are schools like that. In other parts of the world, like in Japan, for example, because of the nature of the country, there's a focus on moral development and responsibility and community responsibility. So it's not that much individualized, but more based on what the community needs from it. So lots of things like happening around the world. But I think that the places that are flexible, like your schools, where you can get online, you can connect, you can do different things, you can have different experiences. Those are really valuable. And we wish more schools were like yours. There are some schools that are so dramatically under-resourced that when we had COVID lockdowns, for example, so many children fell behind because they didn't even have the basic technological access that is available today. So yeah, all around the world, different experiences. My advice to you personally is look around, scan, see what is available, what's out there that can broaden your understanding of the world as well.
Definitely interesting way to answer the question. Rather than a few leading countries, there's certain directions they're leading to.
Yeah.
For example, I think Singapore was the country, they're teaching their kids about entrepreneurship. In Japan, it's more about morality, community needs.
Yeah.
It's interesting how so many, how education can have different ending objectives. That is what charges these systems into these directions, which is interesting because different countries and regions have different needs for why they would want to train their children in a certain way. I reckon. I'm not that sure.
Yeah. Well, I can comment on that. And this can be a little controversial, so I'll try not to say anything completely inappropriate. The way the wealthiest people in the world educate their children, the way royalty educate their children, it's a very different way from how the rest of the country is educated. And when we look back on the original versions of our education systems, it was designed to get the next generation of workers to be educated enough and aware of responsibility and compliant to go into the office or go into the workplaces, the factories, and do the job that needed to be done. They were not being trained for expression, for creativity, for spirituality, for seeking out what is their purpose in life. They were trained for a job. And around the world, people still being trained for a job. And people who had been trained for a job, done very well in an organization and think that they're successful, will train their children to be trained for a job.
Well, it's not personalized.
It's not personalized, and there are not enough jobs. There are not enough jobs in the world anymore. So we have to take care of our education so that we can take care of our careers, and our careers are no longer the 9 to 5, join, retire with a pension fund. That's not, there's a handful of people in the world who will still get that. The majority of us will not. So in that case, my advice is, and I mentioned this on the infographic, is you look at the future, not as your career path. Like, I'm going to join this company and I might change to a different company and I'll get a raise and I'll get a promotion. Think of your career as a portfolio that you're going to break up. So it's not a direct path. It could be that you work somewhere for 5 years and you learn some great things and you get a promotion and you get some extra money. But at the back of your mind the whole time, you're not saying, I'm employed here, I work for them, they pay my salary. At the back of your mind, it's at the beginning of the month, I'm selling my service to this client. The client is hiring me. At the end of this month, I could cancel this contract, or the client could cancel their contract. Just because you're employed does not mean you've got security. So if you are aware that from month to month, you need to, you may need to find another client. By doing that, it means, and it's not about being disloyal, okay? Because the company's not loyal to you. They're not going to take care of you. If you get sick, if you're disabled, there might be an insurance policy, but they're not going to carry you for the next 3 decades. You would become a liability and you would be moved off. So it's not about the loyalty situation. It's about you staying prepared, making sure that you're a constant learner, that you're upskilling yourself, that you're curious and aware of things that are going on. So let's say you manage to save for 5 years in this company, and then you go, I've learned all I need to. This company's benefited from me being here, but it's time for me to move on. And you can move on by going back to school and learning something for another 6 months or 2 years, get another degree or a certificate in something. Or it could be that you take a mini retirement and you take 2 years off and you downscale your lifestyle, you travel a little bit, you learn some things. And now you're fresh, you go into a new job or a new career with new insights, you experience that. So it's not this nice, neat career path that my father would have loved to see me do. It's doing something for 5 years and then 3 years and then staying somewhere for a couple of years because it works for you, but never becoming complacent that you are safe here because the company's not going to take care of you. You have to keep upskilling yourself to be relevant so that you can have better adventures in the future and you can take care of your responsibilities and your family.
I see. It's a nice dynamic way of planning.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Charlotte. It's been a pleasure, and we'll keep on asking you a lot of questions. But before that, we have with us the chairman of AES Anantnag, Kashmir, Mr. John Ulfat. He recently established the American Edu Global School with us. And sir, would you like to ask Miss Charlotte some questions? If you can hear me. Are you there, Mr. John?
He appears to be muted still.
Yeah,
Yes, he's here. Preet, you will have to unmute him. Please try to unmute yourself again, sir. You're not. Yeah.
There you
Yes.
go.
Hi, Charlotte.
Hi, welcome. I'm so glad you're here.
Same here, ma'am. I'm from Anantnag, Kashmir. You might have heard about the beautiful place on earth, Kashmir.
I have.
So we are greatly pleased to join American Edu Global School. So we are venturing from Anantnag, and it has been a great listening you about how to shape the future, prepare our children for, future ready. Nothing to say too much about because uh, it was a great learning for me, in fact. So I hope much more would come from you for us to learn about from here onwards. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. I'd be very happy to share, any resources or ideas, because, like we said, education is such an important part for the future. Otherwise, we're hindering ourselves from the things that we could be developing and exploring. But yeah, so
Right.
far I'm really enjoying everything I've seen about your school. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir, for joining.
Thank you, Vishita.
I think Abdullah, would you like to continue with your questions?
Absolutely, wouldn't mind. I like the direction we were going actually about dynamic planning and how certain like the class, as in like societal classroom, can affect how you learn things because that is the goal of the education system. And we were talking about policies earlier. I think the goal of the education system easily relates to the stuff about policy.
Yeah.
Now, with these goals in mind, I have to ask, what are some emerging trends in education right now that you think will become mainstream in the next 10 years?
It's automatically going to come back to artificial intelligence and technology and access, because that's the thing that is most obvious, and that's not even going to be in the future. It's just what we're seeing more of now. The schools that do not have access to technology, they are scrambling to be able to catch up to that. The personalized education, I think, is also very important. And I can relate it to something else. When we're ill and we go to a doctor and they do a diagnosis, they prescribe medication for us. And medication comes in certain strengths, certain kind of combinations. And a pharmaceutical company factory would have, produced hundreds of thousands of tablets and boxes of that strength to deal with people. When it comes to mental health issues for depression and anxiety, and people are trying to medicate for that, they're finding that sometimes, the regular drugs do not work, or this one clashes with that one, and they wish that the combination was different. So there are some pharmacies, there are some doctors that will focus more on individualized medication. So they will actually mix up a tablet for that person, for their exact condition, based on their age and their weight and things like that, or any other coexisting conditions. So when we get to that kind of, it's called granular, that kind of like for this person, for that person, when we get to that stage in medication, in medicine for people, there's no reason why we can't be doing that for education. So there should always be a broad outline of what needs to be achieved, and then as much as possible to be able to understand that student, help that student to understand themselves. So we need to be a lot more aware of how we think and how we learn. And I'm learning some of this now at my age, which is older. I wish I had learned this 2 decades ago. But now that I understand how I think and how I respond to things and how stress affects me, now I can actually plan my day better, and I can plan my own learning better. And that's what I'm trying to pass on to my children. They've left school, they're in university, but how do they think about their thinking? How do they plan for themselves so that they get the most out of life? What we've been doing in education is trying to take a whole bunch of unique children and then push them into, regular fitting education molds and then work molds. When we do that, they become irrelevant and unhelpful to the working environment. And then the school has to go back, or the system has to go back and try and rework this. So that trend of understanding that there are individual needs in the workplace for people, but also what organizations actually need. They need people with specific skills or experiences that are not regular, that are not traditional. So the more that the systems can personalize and individualize, the more they can actually find the most appropriate place for those students. And it's not always, and this is quite important, it's not always the normal thing we are taught to be ambitious about. If we have if somebody asks you, like, what are your ambitions about your career? And you can go, oh, it's X, Y, and Z. And I want to work for this kind of company and this kind of money and have this kind of car. You want to stop and go, is that really what I want? Or is that what family or society, media has taught me? And then work out what you really do want. Because once you know what you want out of your career, once you realize that that's going to evolve and change over time, depending on relationships and where you are and whether you have a family or not, you know that that's not going to change. Once you know what your values are for the future, then you can respond to that. You can get educated the right way. You're not going to try and educate yourself for a position that's not going to make you happy. So my daughter is in the Netherlands. She said, at a certain point, she says, if I have to take what I've got here now and go and get a job and do this job, for 20 years, she was horrified. This was terrible. And I said, well, you don't want to force yourself into that. You don't want to kind of repress everything that you believe in and value to go and fulfill a function for some other organization or some other person for 20 years and then have a mental breakdown or have a midlife crisis. I said, have your crisis now. And then go and study the things you want to study that make you happy, that make you feel fulfilled, because then you will be of value to the world. But if you just kind of go through through the process and come out like everyone else, there will be a crisis down the line. So yeah, that kind of really fitting people for what they could be doing in the future, that's the most important part of education. And that's going to keep coming through. And whether we're using artificial intelligence or machine learning or computers or tablets or hybrid or Zoom or Google Meets or anything like that, or whether we're sitting down with an old-fashioned book and writing things down, none of the technology matters as much as preparing the student for expressing themselves the best way for their future, because that is what brings value to the world.
Okay. You're not just an employee, you're your own person. Yeah. I like that thinking.
Yeah.
Makes the individual matter a lot, which I like. So one thing that is integral to all of this, and perhaps I'm wrong, I think one core that you need to make all this work, besides policies and students themselves, which we've talked about, is the teachers. So how do you think the role of the teachers would evolve in the next decade or so, as I asked earlier?
So teachers in the past used to bring us information. That was their job. They had to bring the information to us, make us aware of the information, make us understand it, and then be able to tell them back again the information. The information is out there now. We don't need a teacher to give us the information. What we need the teacher to be is a mentor, a guide, a facilitator to help us to learn what that information means for us, what to do with that information. So it's almost kind of like flipping things over. Instead of like the teacher in the classroom saying, here's all the data you need to know. Now go home and do a homework assignment about what that means. It could be that your homework assignment is go home and learn this data. Go online, read a book, ask AI. It doesn't matter. Go get the data, get the information. And then let's come into the classroom and talk about it. Let's learn, let's debate. My favorite subject in school was history.
Mine
not
as
because
well.
of the subject. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
But because the teacher didn't just make us remember dates and wars and stuff. The teacher made us have conversations about what that meant. And that was at a time when the political system in South Africa was vastly different and our system was changing. So I went to school under apartheid. And then as I left school, South Africa was no longer under apartheid because we had a new government. But I was prepared for it because the teacher helped us to understand what was happening. So I didn't just take any automatic, unexamined values into the future, I got to really understand for myself what this moment in history meant for me, for the country. So when teachers can help to facilitate that, it is brilliant. And I can remember the teachers who did by name. I'm Mr. Rice and Mr. Diedrichs. These were the teachers who helped me through understanding what the future meant. That is the value of a really good teacher.
Okay, that's so the role of the teacher is to cooperate with all this. Must be difficult to pull off, but I'm sure it would be impressive. I'm sure many people here have teachers they could name as well, just as she did. This next question. Huh?
Sorry, is somebody asking a question? I'm not sure there was a question somewhere. Okay, it doesn't matter.
All right. So I'm gonna put this. So the classroom, right? The classroom is one of those maybe even stereotypical cores of the education system. You know, it didn't change for a long time. Then COVID happened. Then it changed really well. And now we're here, you and me, in this sort of place, right? The classroom has changed really drastically in the past 5-ish years. So how do you see the classroom evolving further in the next 10 to 20 years?
Yeah. COVID was terrible, but it was helpful in really waking us up to a whole lot of things that we should have been doing before. So kind of forced some change. It brought the future a little bit closer in some cases. Okay, so again, this is a concept of scale. So pardon me, in Africa, if you want to have a bit of fun, there's a site called populationpyramid.net. So population pyramid. But if you go on and you look at the population of different countries in the world, it's a real education, this one. So most of them are kind of like, they look like this. So at the bottom, there's a few young babies being born, and there's a lot of like middle-aged people and then few older people. In some countries, it looks like this. So they're not replacing the population fast enough. So in Japan, they're not replacing the population fast enough. There are not enough children being born. There are towns that are now abandoned, beautiful homes abandoned because there's just not enough people there. So they need to have more and more people coming in. In Africa, the situation's the opposite. It's like a traditional pyramid. We have got so many young people being born without necessarily jobs or education to go into. So we've got a different kind of situation in Africa. This is why a global perspective is so valuable. So the problem in Africa is we have to educate so many young people. We have to have regular classrooms. We have to be able to cater for so many of those children. In other parts of the world or in other school systems where you have the opportunity, like you're saying, the classroom is anywhere. The classroom is anywhere where you have access to the internet. So it can be on your computer, your iPad, it could be on a phone. You could be engaging in classroom activities. You could be on Zoom calls or Google calls. You could be doing research, you could be using AI, wherever you have that technology. So education is not about teaching somebody to sit still in a room for 12 years so that they can sit still in an office for 20 or 30 years and then retire. If that's not what the future is about, then the classroom should not look like this. There are so many more people doing hybrid work, doing virtual work. I've got 2 colleagues who during
what
COVID...
does hybrid work mean, by the way?
Hybrid is when some is online and some is offline. So for example, if there's a room somewhere where there's 20 people in the room and they're watching, and we're online, so there's that kind of group conversation going on while we're also online, and there's a lot of hybrid stuff. So So as a professional speaker, we do a lot of virtual work, we do a lot of in-person work. And then we do some hybrid work where there's a room there and the speaker comes in remotely, or the, pardon me, half the audience is in the room, half the audience is online. So because of all of that, if that is what the future looks like for work, then we have to represent that in our education. We can't think that we can teach people in a classroom and then expect them to be able to go and do all of that in a different way. Sorry, I'm losing my voice.
It's all right. Do you want some water?
Yes. The classroom has to change. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
No, all right. So
I have
yeah.
I have one piece of homework just to mention to you before we head towards any kind of ending. Is this a good time to mention it?
I think after one more question mentioning that.
Go for it.
Yeah.
All right.
So this is basically the question to wrap it all around. One type
okay.
of go before you express what everyone here can do. Bit of add some finality if you want. So with all this in mind, what specific advice would you give to educators and policymakers to future-proof their educational systems?
Okay. All right. I'm going to challenge the word future-proof.
Okay.
And I know a lot of other futurists use it as well, but I don't think it helps us really enough because if you think about a waterproof jacket, you put the waterproof jacket on so that when it rains, you stay dry inside because you've repelled the water. We can't repel the future. We should not be future-proof. We should be future-fit. We should be future-open. We should be future-flexible. And I think the minute we had that kind of conversation, even that description, that has to go back to policymakers and educators to say, if you're trying to solve a problem, if you're trying to guarantee, if you're trying to make a proof of anything, it's not going to work because we cannot. We can do all the exercises. We can learn to anticipate certain things about the future and see trends, emerging trends, etc., and drivers of change. We can do all of that, but we cannot, with any kind of certainty, guarantee what is coming next. We cannot guarantee that there's not another technology being developed in somebody's garage right now that is not going to change things next year. So you cannot solve for all of those things. But you can be more agile and open and flexible and responsive to what is happening. So in that case, the advice is to say to people, to educators and policymakers, is they have to stay curious. They have to stay open. They have to be talking to the inventors, to the people who are designing new things, to the people who are doing crazy things out there in the world. If they have audience with those kinds of people, they can see how the world is evolving and they can bring that thinking back into education and say, how do we create the space for students to learn and evolve and grow and develop into that kind of future opportunity? Or are we going to maintain policies that are just going to prepare them for an ever decreasing relevance in the future? There'll always be companies, like at least for the next 100 years, that will still cater to some traditional education stuff and people who are in that space. They're there, okay, but they're not everybody anymore. There's fewer and fewer of those kinds of jobs. So the rest of us have got to be able to be creative and responsive and curious and go out there and invent something new. So that kind of thinking, if the policymakers are exposed to it, then they can bring that conversation in. There's no formula, there's no agenda to make that happen. It depends on the openness of those educators to get that right.
What do you mean by openness?
Openness to ideas. The minute somebody says, "Oh, we tried that before and it didn't work," then they're closed. Okay. When they say, "Oh, that they tried that in another school system or in another country and it was a big failure, it didn't work." Well, maybe it didn't work in their culture, or maybe it didn't work because that was 5 years ago, but the world's very different today, or maybe it didn't work because it wasn't executed properly. Maybe it will work here. Can we experiment? So any organization that has enough capacity should have like a department of experimentation. And they could say, let's try it in this classroom. Let's try it with this bunch of students. Let's see what could happen. Let's be open to doing things differently, to believing different things, to exploring different ideas, to intentionally opening ourselves up to ideas that are very different to us. So one of the things in futures thinking that we look at is you think about it as comparative reading. So say, for example, you had to read a book for a subject like history. Here's the book you have to read about this war in history. So you read that book, but then you go and you find a book on the other side of the wall, from the other perspective, or one that disagrees with this one. And it's not about being right or wrong. It's not about being converted or anything like that. It's about just to see both sides.
Yeah.
Okay. Because the people on this side really believe that they were doing the right thing. The people on this side really believe they were doing the right thing. But they're, you have to be able to read that and hold conflicting ideas in your mind at the same time. So we need to do that. And that's the kind of openness that we need the people in leadership to have, because it means that they will, they'll be open to saying, you know what, I don't know if this will work or not, but let's try. Let's try, because in trying, even in failing, we have learned something and prepared ourselves more for the future than if we just did the last year's curriculum all over again and tried harder. Because trying harder is not going to make it. It doesn't work anymore.
Thank you for everything you've said. I'm sure everyone listening has had wonderful insights from what you've brought up. There's something that, sure.
Yes.
My bad.
Like Charlotte, you said, we read our past and learn it today and prepare ourselves for the future. So the modern technology is more of the modern education is more of a technology based. And earlier, it used to be a human interaction, more of a human interaction. And there was a transmission of a value system, like you were earlier mentioning. Japan is having, they are emphasizing more on the value system. Singapore is more emphasizing on the entrepreneurial, kind of system. So how can we, like today's education is more dependent upon the technology. Like artificial intelligence has now come up. It has a greater role to play in shaping the future and aiding the student with a huge resource of learning. So how can we? But at the same time, when we see our, older generation, the elder generation below us, they have a lesser. We see generally a lesser acceptance among our elder generation for the future, for the growing kids, because our behavior, our value system is entirely different, because we are not under the direct influence of the human interaction. We are directly under the influence of the technology. So how can we create that environment in the schools so that we can create a blend of value system as well, and fashionize ourselves with the changing, trends in the education system to align ourselves with the, technology at the same time.
Okay, very good. Technology, we need to know how to use technology. There are certainly many people who are making a career out of technology because they really, really understand the stuff. For the rest of us, technology is just a platform. So I'm a futurist, but I call myself a late adopter. So that phrase is, an early adopter is the person who's standing outside the closed doors waiting for the next iPhone to drop, or the next, headphones to drop, or something like that. They want the new technology all the time, and they're always learning. My husband knows all the stuff about artificial intelligence. He plays with new things all the time. And then he comes and tells me once a week something that I need to know, because I'm a late adopter. Because for me, the technology is the thing that I'm using. It's not the important thing. And the thing I'm using is so that I can have human connection. I can have that interaction, and I can get to know people. So for example, if we know that artificial intelligence, machine learning, robotics, automation, if that can do the bulk of the work that humans have been doing, it means humans can do human work. Okay, humans can sit down and create art and write poetry and write music, because we have this opportunity for the technology to do the other stuff that some humans have been doing. But it also means that we as humans, and this is one of those, the sets of skills out of the World Economic Forum that they say is really important, is all the people skills. It means that we need to have more conversation and communication and understanding, and the philosophical framework, the philosophical debates. My father, who I've mentioned, he is very old-fashioned. He has very old-fashioned values. And for one thing, he doesn't like tattoos. He thinks tattoos are really, really terrible. My mom passed away last year, and my daughter who's in the Netherlands, who is very creative, who does a lot of things, she got a tattoo of my mom's signature from her paintings. My daughter had it tattooed on her arm. And my father, who doesn't like tattoos, suddenly realized that this tattoo was an expression of love and respect and acknowledgement and creative expression that the granddaughter had for the grandmother's work. And now my father is re-looking at that tattoo as not just youngsters doing terrible things to their bodies, but a young person prepared to express their devotion to someone and to their work in this specific way. So when we have the platform to have a conversation, when we have the openness to say, like I just said about the comparative reading, it's like, I believe I'm right. My father believes he's right. We're going to keep arguing unless we can sit down and understand each other, when it's not about who's right or wrong. It's not about the correct answer. It's not about coming down to, the answer of a sum. It's about opening up our ideas to understanding more. And the more we understand each other and give space for different values, for different perspectives, for different ambitions, the more we give space to that, the rounder we are as a person. And again, the more valuable we are to ourselves, to the people who care for us, to society, because we're not just fulfilling a function that a robot can do. We're creating something that is uniquely human, and that creation is relationship. It's conversation. It's our values. I hope that helps.
Thank you. Yeah, indeed. Thank you.
Thank you.
Great question and great answer. Now, before we get into the homework that we're going to have everyone do, I'll ask you some of the questions that people in the chat have been having, and they have.
Okay, sure.
Yes. So the first question, artificial intelligence does help us in many things, such as studying, but some people can use them to hack or scam other people. Is there a way to address these problems?
Okay, lovely question. Because it's fundamental to everything that we do. And when something new comes along and we don't quite know what it is about, we can get scared of it, and we can blame it for the wrong things. So my mom, that I just mentioned, was very creative, artistic. She did painting and sculpture and all kinds of things, and she did woodwork. So she had these tools, these woodworking tools, and they're really sharp, because you draw a pattern on, and then you gouge the wood out, and then you sand it and finish it, etc. And she made beautiful work. People had it in their homes all over the place. And I was sitting there watching my mom carve. Now, I was about 11 years old or so. So I'm watching her carve and seeing what she does. Every evening we're watching TV, she's carving her wood and creating her art. And one day she stepped out of the room, and I picked up her woodworking tool, and I started carving away. I could see that she wanted this wood to be gone. So I started gouging the wood out. But I didn't have the skill my mom had. I didn't have the picture in mind. I was just gouging out wood. And luckily she came and rescued her project from me, quickly enough. And I'd gone too deep and I'd gone too far. So she had kind of like fixed that part of the pattern. But it kind of stuck with me for a long time. How come she could make something beautiful with her wood carving tool and I couldn't? I could just make a mess. I've never been able to do anything like that. I can't paint. I'm terrible at painting. I can't draw. But my mom was so good at it. But it was just a skill of using the tools, experience of using the tools that I didn't have. Then one day this thought came to me. If somebody had broken into our lounge and the woodworking tools were lying there, they're very sharp. They could have helped, grabbed it and threatened us with it. And so then I had this little analogy, the kind of alliteration in my head. With my mom, it made a masterpiece. With me, it made a mess. With somebody else, it could have been a murder. They could have maimed us. And it's the same tool. The tool hasn't changed. The tool is not, a good tool or a bad tool or a dangerous tool. It's just a tool, and it depends on the hands that it's in. And the same thing applies to artificial intelligence. Some people can use artificial intelligence to cheat and just, give me the obvious answer and let me write this essay and then I'm done. Others can use it to research and understand and be challenged with new ideas. Other people use it to expand their understanding. Other people use it to create art. And some people will use it to do bad things. But they will use their cell phones to do bad things. They'll use their car to do bad things. It's whose hands it's in. So there should be regulations. There should be certain things in place, just like there are regulations about weapons and there's regulations about cars. But it doesn't mean that the weapon, okay, well, weapons are a different story, but it doesn't mean that the car is bad. The car is just, it's a neutral thing. So yes, there's regulations, but we can't ever prevent people from doing something bad with it. Because if it wasn't artificial intelligence, they would find another way to do the bad thing that they intend to do.
I imagine moral education would alleviate some of this. Yes,
there is some interesting study that says when we have those moral conversations, when we challenge someone about their morals, about their values, immediately before an exam, they're actually less likely to cheat just because they've been reminded of it. But there's also some other studies that say when we do a whole lot of good things in a row, like we walk around and we go, oh, there's litter, and I pick up the litter and I'm polite to somebody and I donate some money to charity, there's a certain point in our I don't know, our moral compass that goes, I've done enough good things for the day. And then the next thing you do is you cheat at something, you know. It's weird. It's human nature. Yeah, it's like, yeah, I've done enough, so I get a little bit of badness for the day. So yes, there's a lot of really interesting psychology around that. But this is the conversation we should be having, because this is the philosophical conversation. Do we create robots and AI to do work so that we're free to do other things? Do we use it to...
That actually relates to another question. I can ask that now if you'd like.
Yeah, no, go for it.
Okay. I'm glad you brought this up. It really transitions smoothly. How can we make use of artificial intelligence in our studies without over-reliance?
Okay. You've got to see it as a tool. You've got to see it as a tool again, not as the results. So, for example, I love writing books. I write lots of content, and every now and then I'm stuck. There's too much going on in my brain, so I go to AI and I say, just give me a framework, like, you know, the top 5 points that I need to address in this piece of writing, and it will do it. And I could just go and publish that. And people will go, oh, look, Charlotte's published something, but it's not unique. It's not personal. There's no depth to it at all. And it's the obvious thing. And this is something that I hope you all get to experience at some point, because it's a creative expression of yourself. You will write an essay. You will do a piece of work. You'll work in a company and do something. You'll create something for yourself. And you'll go, I did that. It's good, but it's obvious. Other people can do that. I wonder what I can do beyond the obvious. What is beyond this that is just uniquely me? So now I've got into the habit, when I sit down with AI, I say, give me the 10 points, and I don't even read it. I say, thank you for the 10 points. Now, if you're going to explore a bit deeper, give me the next 10 points. So now I try something a bit deeper. I say, okay, that's great. And I'm lying because it's not great. It's like, it's obvious. And then I say, what would be the things nobody would ever expect to read about or hear about? What are the kind of like slightly fringe topics? Give those to me. And then it produces a list. I'm going, that's interesting. Now it's interesting. Now I've got something to work with. And then I take those ideas and I express them from myself, my experiences, my values, my history, etc. And then I write whatever it is I'm trying to write. So the point is, I'm using the tool, but I'm using the tool to go deeper and deeper and deeper until it's given me a prompt, an idea that I can respond to in a way that is really valuable and unique and creative. So that's how I'm using the tool. So we don't need to remember the years that wars happened. We don't, my teachers back in my day would say you won't walk around with a calculator in your pocket, and of course we do. So we got access to a whole lot of data. So let us keep using AI to find more creative ways to do something. So how about you had a lesson and you use AI to generate an ebook on the lesson. You use AI to generate a podcast script on it. You use AI, and these are all tools that are out there. You use AI as if it's a news reporter telling you the latest news on this topic. You use AI to go and write you a unique song with a score, with music and everything on the topic. You use AI to go and create an animated video on the topic. You just use all these different tools that you're learning how to use, okay? But you're going deeper and deeper into your topic so that you can express it more, you can understand it more, it becomes more personal to you because you've created with that topic. Rather than just learning and then writing an essay, here was the war and here's how many people died. It's like, no, here's a song about the war, and here's an AI painting of the battle scene. That's how we use AI to really tap into what we're about as humans and to bring that to life.
Wonderful. All right, so we will have to wrap, but before we do, so the homework. Let's talk about what can everyone here do at home.
All right. So, like I said, this is on the infographic that I've sent. On the second page, there's 5 points. On the second page, it says reimagine your career, like we talked about before. So, don't just think you're going to work in one place. It could be different careers. You can have a break. You can come back to work. You can go and study, etc. So, do that. Build your portfolio. So right now, every time that you do something great, you produce something, you have a leadership position, you get a testimonial or a recommendation, you should all have LinkedIn profiles before you finish school and start connecting with people. All of that is in your portfolio. And just have a folder somewhere online where all of this is recorded, because someday you'll want to use that to express what it is you're now capable of doing. So there's projects that I'm doing now that I can say, back 25 years ago, I won an award in this space. Just shows you that I've been around a bit in this space. I know what's going on. So get that portfolio ready. It will fill up. Don't worry if it's empty right now. It will fill up. So that's your portfolio. Follow the dopamine. I know this is totally opposite advice to what you should be getting. But if something interests you, go and spend a couple of hours reading about it, learning about it, playing with it. You don't have to have a career in it. If you've got homework and stuff to do, then you've got to do that. But follow the dopamine. Find the things that are interesting you, because that could turn into something in the future. Take ownership of your career path from today. You've got this great school. You've got these great advantages. Take ownership of it and take advantage of that so that you can go even further. But this is the homework. Write a CV for yourself, a resume or a CV, however you want to write it, and forward date it, say 10 years time. And in the CV, it could be, I've had these leadership experiences, these volunteer experiences. I've been to these countries. I've learned these languages. I have done these qualifications or these certifications. I've had this kind of project and that kind of project. I've got these measurable skills. Write out that CV. I know that this is not true, so do not ever cheat with your CV. You will be found out. It's terrible. Okay. The CV is for you. You write that out. It's 10 years in the future. And you can go and revisit it once a year or so, or you can print it out and have it more visual depending on what you prefer. But by writing out a CV about what you would like things to look like in 10 years' time means that if somebody says to you, hey, can you volunteer to do this? And you go, well, I'm a little bit busy, but I needed to have volunteering opportunities on my CV. So yes, I'll volunteer, as long as it doesn't get, too busy, I'll volunteer to do this project, or I'll stand for leadership in that project, or, I'll write an article about this thing, so that you can build towards that CV, and you can revisit it every now and then and go, oh, that was interesting, but I actually don't want to do those things. I've discovered new things, or there's a new field that I really want to explore. So you can update your future dated CV. But by having that, you're preparing your brain to look for those opportunities, and you're finding and exploring things to add into the value of everything is that you know and you can do. So that's your homework. Write your CV forward dated about 10 years at least.
Very engaging homework.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you, Abdullah. Thank you, Charlotte. I extend a really hearty vote of thanks on behalf of EduVentures and its verticals, K12 schools and American Edu Global, to our chief guest, Charlotte Kemp, who spared time from her busiest of schedule to grace the occasion. Today, we had a wonderful opportunity to hear about your thoughts, and I'm sure this will surely going to, encourage us in our future events. And, your thoughts have enlightened our minds and they have shown us a new path today. My gratitude to you for gracing the occasion and sharing the opinions today. I am
Thank
immensely
you.
thankful to Abdullah Sakir Khan for his efforts towards anchoring today. And thank you, everyone, for being there on our journey today. Thank you so
Thank you
much.
very much. I'm going to
Thank
extend
you.
one quick invitation as well. Anyone who wants to connect with me on LinkedIn, I'd be very happy. And then you can tell me in the future how far your CV is from where you are or where you thought it would be from today. Thank you very much for the invitation.